yourself available. And Professor Hansford from Howard University. Thank you both for the timely conversation we're going to have this morning. So, without further ado, we call on Tanya here, the director of Bunche Centers. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Tania Hope. I am the director here of the Bunche International Affairs Center. Welcome to the Bunche Center. Welcome to Howard University. And thank you to UN USA for organizing this event. We're very happy to partner with you once again. And I'll just tell you, we just moved into this space like 2 months ago. So we're still unpacking boxes and putting things on the walls. So everything is not as it will hopefully be one day, but we're working on it. This is a little bit of an upgrade from our previous space. We have this lovely view and we look forward to making use of it in this way and other ways. So hopefully this will be the first event with you all, but not the last. And the next time you come, it'll be different. Let's cross our fingers for that one. Okay. So the Bunche Center, just really quickly, is, and then we also do a lot of global programming. So events like this. And right after this, I'm running up to our College of Fine Arts because we're hosting Professor João Cândido Portinari, the son of the very famous Brazilian painter Cândido Portinari, who's giving a presentation about his father's artwork up in the College of Fine Arts. So we like to take advantage of our location here in Washington, D.C. People just come through and they want to talk at Howard, they call us and we make it happen. And we love that for our students and for the connections and relationships that it allows us to build and strengthen. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. You can follow us on social media if you want to stay in touch. HU Bunche Center on Instagram, and sometimes on X. I don't really do that, but anyway, sometimes. And then Facebook, the whole name of the center. Okay, getting right along with it, I'm going to introduce our two speakers here. Well, first, my good friend, Justin Hansford, the Executive Director of the Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Center at our law school, which he founded in 2017. He was previously a Democracy Project Fellow at Harvard University, a visiting professor of law at Georgetown University Law Center, and an associate professor of law at St. Louis University. He has a bachelor's from here at Howard University and a JD from Georgetown University Law Center, where he was founder of the Georgetown Journal of Law and Modern Critical Race Perspectives. Justin is a leading scholar and activist in the areas of critical race theory, human rights, and law and social movements. He is a co-author of the forthcoming 7th edition of Race, Racism, American Law. I think actually that's out.
Yeah, don't read that whole thing. It's
I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just, I mean, he's right. It's long, but there are some things that we just got to mention. Okay, we got to celebrate you. So anyway, he's done a lot of amazing things, but probably most of you already know this. And if you want more to read his bio, you can go to the Howard Law School website and you can read it there. So thank you, Justin. And then
I was going to say the UN work is probably most relevant.
Yes, he's an elected member of the UN Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. Yes?
That's right.
Yes, we love that.
Got it.
About to get our second decade. Yes.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. All right, and our special guest today, Mary Lawlor, a special rapporteur for human rights defenders. She took up the mandate of special rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders in May of 2020, following the Human Rights Council decision 43-115. Ms. Lawlor is currently an adjunct professor of business and human rights in the Center for Social Innovation, School of Business, Trinity College, Dublin. She's a member of the advisory board of the School of Business. She has worked extensively with and on the situation of human rights defenders. In 2001, she founded Frontline Defenders, the International Foundation for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders, to concentrate on human rights defenders at risk. As executive director from 2001 to 2016, Ms. Lawlor represented Frontline Defenders and had a key role in its development. I'm gonna, so humble. Okay, I will stop there and so we can hear from them. And thank you both very much for being here.
Thank you. And Special Rapporteur Lawlor, I just want to once again welcome you to Howard University, my alma mater and my place of employment. You have been a huge resource to people throughout the world. I myself, before I became a professor, was a human rights activist. So we called on you for help in Ferguson, and your office for help in Ferguson during the Black Lives Matter protests. So we're very thankful that you're here and continuing that legacy. And I just want to get right into the questions. First of all, regarding your upcoming 4th report that you're going to be delivering to the UN General Assembly next week. And it's going to involve human rights defenders and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I welcome you to take the floor and discuss your report or whatever is on your mind at this moment.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for allowing me to be here and for showing up to listen and to ask questions and to do whatever you want to do. So just in terms of the report, many people really don't think that human rights defenders have much to do with the Sustainable Development Goals, and especially if you look at the 169 targets and the 247 indicators contained in the SDG framework, there's only a single mention of human rights defenders, and that's in relation to goal number 16. But in the hundreds of meetings that I've had around the world over the past few years, it's clear to me that the scale and depth of the work that human rights defenders do goes far beyond a single goal. Human rights defenders are contributing to all of the goals in the SDGs. And even if they don't frame it that way themselves, I wanted to use this report to show states that, and UN agencies and human rights defenders themselves, that their work in defense of human rights is not limited to goal 16 or the traditional civil and political kind of rights that everybody always thinks, but more that it actually, you find human rights defenders working often at risk across every single goal. For example, on SDG 9, which is industry, innovation and infrastructure, it relates to access to affordable credit. A number of human rights organizations in Somalia have partnered together to launch a microcredit scheme in rural areas to provide small loans to individuals and to small businesses to allow them to begin or expand their work. And human rights defenders, of course, are well placed to do this because they're trusted by the community where they engage in human rights work, and also they're trusted by donors familiar with their work and with their track records of helping others. A second reason I wanted to focus on the SDGs was because in my interactions with governments, as I said, far too many see human rights defenders as people who work nearly exclusively on civil and political rights, and as people who use human rights as a sort of Trojan horse to bring about Western-inspired political change. And like we're nearly a quarter of a century in from the Cold War, so I think it's time now that governments accept that human rights are universal and that human rights defenders work in every single country, regardless of that country's political system. And I think the SDGs are a good vehicle to demonstrate this because every single UN member state has signed on to the goals and committed to their implementation. It's a kind of a way in for me, I suppose. And over 90% of the targets are rooted in international human rights law. So it stands to reason that human rights defenders are integral to their success.
Great. Thank you. Can you hear me? Maybe I'll let you hold the microphone. Okay.
Share the mic.
Okay. All right, we'll share.
Sorry.
That's okay. going off of the last point you made, as you know, my mandate with the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent includes collecting aggregated data on disaggregated data on people of African descent. And we have launched something called the Black Audit Project, where we are going to different cities around the country and hopefully around the world, collecting data on how well people of African descent are doing on the Sustainable Development Goals, and putting that into a report that can then be used for advocacy. So we're looking specifically at the UN Sustainable Development Goals through the lens of people of African descent's ability to accomplish those goals. In fact, I'm going straight from here to the airport to do another Black Audit in Dayton, Ohio. But so following off of that, in terms of minority rights and specific, at-risk populations, how do you interact with those communities as the Special Rapporteur dealing with human rights defenders? How has that work been manifested in your practice?
Well, just as you say that, next week I have invited a very young man who's 24 he's a Quilombola defender from Brazil, and he has never traveled. We helped him get a passport, and we had, with the help of very many people, managed to get a visa for him. He was turned down the first time on the basis that he was unemployed and he was traveling alone, but he's a leader of his community. His father was killed when he was 17, and his grandmother was killed last year. And when I met him in the middle of nowhere in this kind of tiny little dirt clearing where there were little plastic chairs set out to hear the testimonies of the Quilombola community there, I wanted to bring him because he's going to be a real superstar in many years to come. He had learnt English off the internet himself in a year, and he was so committed to trying to bring about the rights of his Quilombola community and kind of map out all the discrimination and the areas where they have nothing. So he's coming next week to talk at the side event that we put on for the report. But another example that comes to mind to me is the situation of Cancer Alley in Louisiana. You know about this?
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe some of these don't, so I
Okay, yeah.
So, in the context of the work that human rights defenders are doing there in a small community, and some of you may be aware, and you certainly are, that there's an area in Louisiana that's home to more than 150 refineries and petrochemical plants, which is apparently the largest concentration of these types of plants in the Western Hemisphere. And their presence had led to increased cancer rates and respiratory illnesses among the local population, which are primarily and mostly African American. And a couple of years ago, a group of special rapporteurs issued a press release pointing to the continued development of petrochemical plants here as a form of environmental racism, when they are not being developed at the same rate in areas where predominantly white people live. And against this backdrop, a number of local activists came together to challenge these interests and their continued development, and formed grassroots groups, including one called Rise St. James. And many are led by black women. And my message to the US government is that these women are human rights defenders. Under the Biden administration, the US has been more vocal in support of human rights defenders around the world, which of course is very welcome, but I would like to see that support also being given, welcome in the US, to those defenders who are fighting for the rights of their communities. More generally, on every country visit I go to, as I mentioned my official visit to Brazil earlier this year, I do try to meet with more human rights defenders working on minority issues and raise their cases, because it's always those who represent the dispossessed, less visible, or scapegoated that are most at risk. And it's true of indigenous defenders in Brazil, it's true of Uyghur defenders in China, it's true of Adivasi defenders in India, all of whom I have written to the respective states about raising concerns about their treatment. And you know, although it's not linked to the actual question, I can't not mention the situation of human rights defenders in Israel and Palestine. Defenders in Israel who object to the mass killing of Palestinians are being smeared, threatened and harassed at all levels of society, including most recently by the Israeli ambassador to the UN, who attacked the director of B'Tselem, which, as you all know, is one of the most reputable Israeli human rights organization, after she spoke at the Security Council. And Palestinian human rights defenders are being massacred in their dozens as they attempt to deliver food supplies to the starving population, as they attempt to document the horrific atrocities that are going on, or provide humanitarian support. So, yeah.
No, thank you. And that's such an important, all of those cases are so important. I'm on the board of an organization called the Center for Constitutional Rights, which was the lawyers for the African Americans in Cancer Alley in Louisiana. So very proud of the work that's happening. And on that note, I want to speak about your report from the other side of the coin. You did note that it seems like almost 300 human rights defenders have been killed this year in 28 countries. You mentioned the situation involving human rights defenders in the horrific conflict in Gaza, which the UN has concluded is genocidal, very likely. And there's so much bad news. So my question to you is, what is the good news? What are some of the things? Is there good news? It's the first question. Is there good news? And what is the good news? And even to get you started, I'll say one thing to get you started on that. I know here at Howard University, we have some future human rights defenders perhaps in the audience, some students of ours. I teach a class on movement lawyering involving civil rights lawyers and human rights lawyers in the future. So we do have some good news in terms of the training of future human rights defenders here at Howard. But do you have other, round of applause for them.
Yes.
Do you have any, hoping that you have some other positive things to reflect on?
Well, I think I'd start by saying there are more people involved in human rights now and NGOs than ever before. There is a website, a scientific website that tries to track numbers, and they estimate that there are about 10 million worldwide. So when I started in the 70s, there was very few. So because we all hear, all of you, me, about all the bad things that are happening all the time, and we're trying to work in an area where the news is incessantly bad. It has led me to try and change my approach when I'm talking about defenders. I still highlight all the risks, but I do it in a way that emphasizes their impact. And because it was the 25th anniversary of the Declaration on Human Rights Defenders last year, I did my report to the Human Rights Council on successes of human rights defenders. And I took, I think it was about several years, just a couple of years, we examined the cases and the successes, and we got a lot of submissions. And really it was the most wonderful report, if you work in human rights, to be able to do. And I'm talking about things, there's a children's organisation in Bangladesh who works with the local commissioner, and they have prevented at least 13 forced child marriages. There is a group in Yemen, Mothers of Abductees, who work with both sides of the warring factions to discover what has happened to their loved ones who have been disappeared, and in some cases have been able to either confirm that the person has been dead and allow the family to grieve, or in more joyful cases has been able to secure the release of the loved one and reunite the families. You know, when in 1998, when the Declaration on Human Rights Defenders was adopted, same-sex marriage was not allowed in any country, and now we have 35 countries where same-sex marriage is allowed across 4 regions. And then you see the enormous strides that environmental defenders have made in getting the whole issue of the environment and climate onto the international agenda. So I have millions of examples, not millions, I have many examples in that report, and we collect as we go along. You know, we have endless online meetings with human rights defenders, and because in the beginning, you know, we were all over the place and I hadn't a clue who I was talking to sometimes, where they were, and they assumed I knew everything about their region, their country, their village. So we had to devise a short questionnaire where they had to give just the bare bone details of who they were, their work, and you know, the risks they face. And then we asked anything that you've been proud of, and we've been collecting that since since whenever I started, Monday 20, and so we have a wealth of information showing the successes of human rights defenders. So, and we try to carry through into this. So that's the successes report where we document, you know, all the, like there was a young guy in Botswana who single-handedly brought, his mother was terrified that he would be attacked, but he single-handedly brought a case to the court on decriminalization of homosexuality, and he won. And there's so many examples in that report. But in the SDG report that I'm presenting next week, I also try and carry through it the impact that human rights defenders working across the SDGs have, both large and small. So, for example, women human rights defenders in Sudan who drew on their networks and experience to provide food security to some of the most vulnerable people in the country. They established, and you often see this in countries that go into conflict. You know, a lot of human rights defenders, they still try to monitor and document the atrocities that are happening, but they also turn to humanitarian relief and to trying to meet the needs of the population. So these women established local kitchens, and without access to international food aid and often at great risk, they provided sustenance to 250,000 families in Khartoum for nearly a year. And then in Myanmar, human rights defenders from the civil disobedience movement are opening schools to allow children continue their education in rebel-held areas in the country amidst the ongoing civil war. And here in the US, of course, the community and groups involved in organizing protests against the ongoing pollution of their water sources by so-called forever chemicals by large manufacturing plants. I'll have again, along with my young Kilambala friend next week, we have the co-founder of one of those groups, Clean Cape Fear, speaking at the side event. Their impact was visible when the government issued a first ever nationally enforceable national and legally enforceable drinking water standard to protect the community from exposure to these harmful chemicals earlier this year. So we see, and I think we all need to see the impact of the work that human rights defenders are, and it's not hard to find. You just have to keep reminding yourself that it's not all bad.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I want to thank you for that. I know that at the Thurgood Marshall Center, we've worked to support and defend, in some cases in the courts, climate justice defenders, environmental justice defenders. Cop City was another major struggle happening in Atlanta recently that we were helping to defend. So thank you so much for your work. And one last question before we open it up. We are now closing out your 4th year in this position, and I'm wondering what your big takeaways are after 4 years with these experiences that you've had. What are the things that you are reflecting on, and what are some of the lessons that you've learned? I guess maybe the top 2 or 3 things that you would say are your main takeaways.
Always a hard question. There isn't that much time for reflection, but anyway, we have a bash. First of all, I take a people-centered approach to the mandate because I see my allegiance and my accountability to human rights defenders. So that's where I come from. In because I was in Amnesty and then I started Frontline, so until now I've been all my life, working in an NGO. So what I think my big takeaway is the different roles that we all have to play and how success is a collective effort. I think, NGOs and human rights defenders, civil society organizations, they are the people who can bring the information to the attention of the international community. They are the ones that can document, can monitor, and can be the eyes and ears on the ground. And then, move it to the international community, the kind of local and regional networks, and then when it comes to somebody like me, an independent expert, I take that information, obviously I have to verify it, but I take that information and I think the added value of me now is, like the nice states would always talk to you when you're in an NGO, and even some of the hostile states would, go through the motions. But now what I find is they all feel they have an obligation to basically at least listen to you. Now, it doesn't mean that you change anyone's mind, but it means that you have access, I suppose, more access than if you are working in an NGO. And then we've seen the role can have impact through successes achieved through the communication system, press releases, social media, country visits, and direct advocacy with permanent missions, where we've seen that the situation of human rights defenders has improved. For example, I was on a country visit to Algeria. There was a woman human rights defender in prison. She was a cultural rights defender. I succeeded in getting a prison visit she was in a very remote area, to visit her, and the day before I came, she had the first medical checkup that she'd had, she told us, since she'd been imprisoned, and then she was released there just a couple of weeks, maybe a month ago. So you can see that, that even if it's only, they feel they have to do something, you can succeed sometimes. And social media, I'm a dinosaur, I have to say, in social media, but it's really extraordinary. And of course, I have somebody who is excellent at social media and knows how you do it and all of that. And the team, like Ed over there, who's my senior advisor, who's brilliant. You know, we go through all the tweets and everything, and we approve them before they go up. We also have to get consent. That's really important, you know, that you have consent of anybody that you're taking up. But there were 2 women human rights defenders in India, for example, that we tweeted about. And the tweet went viral in India, and they were released. Again, intervention in proposed laws that will impact negatively on the work of human rights defenders, which, as we know, are pretty much in so many places now. But in Honduras and in South Korea, the laws were shelved after we did tweets and social media. And then even, for example, we had a really nice experience lately in that we were approached by the relatives of a Chinese doctor who has been imprisoned and given a sentence of six years in Xinjiang. And her family had received no information about her trial, didn't know what prison she was being held in. And then the Chinese government responded to the communication I sent, and which was a huge source of relief to the family, because they finally got some information on her. So you know, there I suppose the takeaway. I mean, the real takeaway, and I don't need to tell any of you this, is you have to be resilient, you have to persist, you have to resist, and you have to keep going. And even if it does seem at times that it is impossible, I always think of it as, you know, people working in human rights, they're clawing up a cliff, but hanging on by their fingernails, they're pushing the boulder up the hill. But they get there, and they're small victories. You know, I think that human rights defenders, they work with madness and a bit of hope. And, you know, if they have some small victories, it's enough to keep them going. And I think that's really, you know, I see it all the time, and I think the persistence and the resilience is the thing that will keep the human rights movement going over time.
Great, thank you so much.